Ladies and gentlemen, today's rant is going to be about something that I find to be extremely overrated. That is Star Wars. The whole fucking franchise and everything related to it. I decided that I'd like to add these types of rants to my repertoire, akin to what Joshua Davis, aka Kirk Nesnetters, used to do back in '07 and '08, which is Overrated series. You know, the one with the 3 Days Grace song in the opening, which reminds me, they are on the shitty albums review list with the others. Anyways, to the actual rant, Star Wars is overrated. Whenever people talk about Star Wars, I get this unrelenting numbness in my brain. Everything that I recall from what I've seen in pop culture referencing it, selected scene reels, memorabilia in stores, or whatever, all seems to clog my sixth sense and I suddenly feel less energized than when people were not talking about the films. It has something to do with the color scheme. All I ever see from clips of the movie are a bunch of whites, platinums, very tan oranges and browns, and light smattered tinges of black for the foreground. And that's about it. Those stupid fucking lightsabers don't appease my nagging thirst for color dynamic, and I feel the same way I do when looking at them, as I do when the teachers at school would hand out popsicle sticks. Lethargy and unresolved. I better say it now. Popsicles are fucking worthless. Those things called freezer pops are even worse. Whoever's idea it was to make a desert of frozen flavored water on a stick for eating outside in the summer doesn't strike me as a very intelligent person. But I guess the general populace isn't very intelligent anyway, since we still have aisles full of freezers assigned for them in our grocery stores. They don't even have any fat or carbohydrates like a cake or cookies would. I've only ever seen the original film from 1977, and all I can say is that it was very boring. And that was just 3 years ago. My aunt lent me a box set containing all 6 movies about 4 years ago, and all that does these days is just collect dust. During the past decade and in the 90s, in Blockbuster and other video store chains, I'd typically see things related to Star Wars, like those cutouts of the cast members wielding those gay-ass glowing, unpointed swords, and I'd see this as a world that I could never get into. Not when there were other important things to watch, like Arthur and The Simpsons. It was typically my dad and my other siblings who would go out to the video store and browse for movies or video games to rent. My dad never even mentioned anything about Star Wars to me. As a kid, and given his taste in movies, he probably doesn't like the series either. But seeing that cardboard cutout of some froggish-looking young guy with a glowing sword every weekend was a 4 stars recipe for deep calm sleep. Not to mention the woman from this movie. I'm not talking about the one who's Natalie Portman, because she's one fine piece of ass, but I'm talking about this woman. I was either told who she was by someone I knew a long time ago, or I found out on some TV show referencing Star Wars. She goes by Princess Leia. It's like I'm trying to go to grade school, have a childhood, play Ape Escape, and Silent Hill, but this woman either keeps appearing on my TV screen or is being homaged into oblivion elsewhere, and there's zero difference between this and having some child repeatedly running over to your table in a restaurant and smacking your table over and over again for attention. 20 years in this planet and I still don't have an answer to why people are so fascinated by this hairstyle. Another thing I hate about Star Wars is the music. People think that the soundtrack to Star Wars is the greatest thing in the universe, but it's really an overly loud bore of a score. The sound of the theme is a very cheeky abundance of major keys and ceaselessly meanders along with those keys in a lack of awareness that the director and the passive couch potato audience have terrible artistic sensibilities. When I was in middle school, I was in the school band. I played clarinet and we were all assigned to play the Star Wars soundtrack medley for one of the band concerts. That meant, for 2 months out of the school year, I had to listen to the theme for Star Wars 5 days out of the week, and not only that, I was being forced to play the music for Star Wars. I was ready to swallow a bottle of Xanax. It was just me sitting in band class silently, as the band director was making jokes and references with all the chunky, pedestrian dorks in the room. The fanboys of Star Wars are the biggest nuisance known to man. If you're at school or whatever, and the teacher decides to put on the movie Star Wars, there always ends up being every student in the classroom screwing up the layout of the desks to move their chairs 5 feet in front of the overhead TV. And their eyes and their bodies will stagnate there for 2.5 and sometimes 3 hours just to watch their space opera for the literal 100th time, just like Miss V. This is in a school, so they have all not or barely reached the age of 18. This means they are bound to rewatch the movie on an average of 300 to 350 more times before they plop down, ass first, into their magic space coffin, because they are such great communist swamp fisherman hat-wearing Star Wars fanatics. Have you ever been at school and you are doing your schoolwork and the other people around you in the room go off on a disorganized tangent of a conversation about Star Wars? It happens just about every week. This ends up being 1/3 to half of the students in the room, and these fanboys and fangirls alt out the various names and terminology about the franchise, yet nothing about what they say ever sounds even faintly interesting. I've even had some people at school tell me that I'm a gay homo because I haven't watched Star Wars. Well, motherfucker, that's not what it means to be a homosexual, for one thing. Second, just like you, and the last poor bastard you harassed, everybody is entitled to their own opinions on certain movies. We are not all required to like Star Wars, just like we aren't all required to like a far superior film, like Taxi Driver, so chill out. And if you want to go there, just think, a film like Taxi Driver reveals Star Wars' homosexual undertones by contrast. Star Wars also has numerous video game adaptations, all of which I do not own. I don't even own a copy of Star Fox anymore, because it makes me think of Star Wars slightly too much. I mean, how can people play such boring dribble? Look at this bullcrap. What the fuck? My eyes hurt looking at this shit. If you look at the sky, it's the same color category. I don't give a shit if it's supposed to be on a different planet, it looks like fucking shit. Very many people will dub this film as the greatest movie they have ever seen. I just can't see how they can watch a movie with such a boring color scheme instead of real movies like Profondo Rosso. They all like Star Wars, but they don't seem to realize the importance of other movies and TV shows, like the first 4 seasons of Arthur. Star Wars sucks because of its style and doesn't have any chic-and-Americanisms that you see in films like Profondo Rosso, The Thing, Roman Polanski's The Tenant, The Wicker Man, Taxi Driver, or Black Christmas, or other films with those elements. Star Wars fans are all in crowd-eyed sheep, the films are overly boyish and too American. And Star Trek is probably even worse, and just as ugly to look at. Jeez, this was terrible to even talk about. Give me some Tom York from Radiohead and Brett Anderson to wash my eyes and ears out.